Lord Conrad II reads of Burg erected Frankenstein Castle about 1250 and became von and zu Frankenstein. First record indicating castle existence in 1252 bears his name. He established the free imperial barony of Frankenstein in Niederbeerbach, Darmstadt, Ockstadt, Wetterau, and Hesse, subject exclusively to the emperor. As burgraves of Zwingenberg, Darmstadt, Groß-Gerau, Frankfurt am Main, and Bensheim, the Frankensteins had various possession and sovereignty rights. Another 11th century castle presumably stood on the hill where the castle now sits, but it collapsed when Frankenstein Castle was erected to the northwest. Many claim an even older antecedent atop the hill, although this is dubious. The Frankensteins granted the Counts of Katzenelnbogen entry to the castle in 1292 and made an alliance with them. The castle was divided between two Frankenstein lords and knights' families in 1363. In the early 15th century, the castle was expanded and refurbished. The Katzenelnbogen counts lost control of the Frankenstein knights again. The family opposed the Reformation because of their Roman Catholic beliefs and right of patronage. Lord John I sold the lordship to the Landgraves of Hesse-Darmstadt in 1662, following many litigation before the Imperial Chamber Court due to territorial problems and related concerns. After serving as a shelter and hospital, the castle collapsed in the 18th century. The mid-19th century repairs that made the two towers so distinctive are historically wrong. The Odenwald, where Frankenstein Castle is situated, is a mysterious mountain area with gloomy woods and small valleys. Frankenstein Castle legends abound. All have affected the region's culture and customs, but none are proven. Johann Conrad Dippel, an alchemist, was born at the castle in 1673. Dippel may have affected Mary Shelley's Frankenstein imagination. However, Shelley's diaries don't mention the castle. Shelley travelled on the Rhine in 1814 before writing the book. She spent a few hours at Gernsheim, 16 kilometers, 10 miles, from the castle. Dippel is mentioned in many Mary Shelley non-fiction publications. Dippel's oil, an animal oil, was claimed to be the elixir of life. Dippel offered to buy Castle Frankenstein for his newly found elixir recipe, but it was rejected. Dippel may have undertaken alchemy and anatomy experiments on excavated corpses at Frankenstein Castle. He allegedly dug up remains and did medical experiments at the castle, and a local clergyman would have notified his parish that Dippel had produced a lightning-born monster. Lightning brings Frankenstein's monster to life in the 1931 picture, not the story. Locals still say this occurred, and that the Brothers Grimm, German ethnologists, told Shelley's stepmother this story. These allegations have yet to be confirmed, and several local scholars dispute Mary Shelley's link to Frankenstein Castle. August Nodnagel, 1803–1853, as Lord George in the Dragon Tale, is renowned. Some say a fearsome dragon dwelt in Burg Frankenstein's garden beside the well. The dragon frightened the nearby Niederbeerbach villagers. The dragon allegedly ate residents and their children at night. A warrior named Lord George rode into town. When they saw a valiant knight, the townspeople were desperate and told him their problems. He offered to assist. The following day he donned his armor and rode to the castle, into the garden, and to the well where the dragon was resting in the sun. Lord George dismounted and fought the dragon. A dragon battled for his life, puffing and spewing fire and steam. Hours passed as they fought. As the knight and dragon were ready to collapse from tiredness, the knight thrust his blade into the beast's underbelly and won. In pain, the dragon curled its tail with the venomous spine around the knight's belly and stung. Both Lord George and the dragon fell. The people were so delighted the dragon was killed that they wished to bury the knight honorably. They gave him a beautiful grave at Niederbeerbach Church in the valley east of the castle. Visitors may still honor Lord George, the knight who slew the dragon in the 1200s. A spring of youth is hidden beneath the castle herb garden. On the first full moon night following Walpurgis Night, local elderly ladies had to face daring tests. The winner was regenerated to her wedding night age. It is unclear whether this custom continues. Frankenstein Castle got worldwide notice after Ghost Hunters Worldwide aired an episode about it and reported significant paranormal activity. Investigators met with a Frankenstein specialist to examine stories and paranormal encounters. Audio and video equipment were employed during the inquiry. An ultrasonic recorder detected speech in the church and entry tower sounds. A sound was recognized as a phrase in Old German that means "Abo is here," likely meaning Arbogast, a castle knight declaring his arrival and claim over the territory. A second soundbite meant "Come here." The crew departed Frankenstein Castle believing in paranormal activity. Near Frankenstein Castle, a gold rush in the 18th century produced trouble. Locals thought a treasure was concealed near the castle, according to a tale and fortune-teller visions. In 1763, chaos continued despite a Niederbeerbach priest's intervention. Fortune hunters kept digging until Johann Heinrich Drott was murdered when his excavation collapsed, even though no gold vaults were uncovered. His funeral was suicide-related. Further efforts in 1770, 1787, and 1788 yielded nothing useful. Local authorities forbade gold mining then. Compasses fail in a lonely woodland behind Frankenstein Castle on 417-meter-high Mount Ilbers, owing to natural magnetic stone formations. Some local witches and environment lovers conduct rituals at these magnetic sites on Walpurgis Night and summer solstice. Visitors are welcome at the magnetic stones, but please do not disrupt rituals. According to legend, witches in Germany assemble at Mount Ilbers, second only to Mount Brocken in the Harz. A vast Felsenmeer, sea of rocks, at Lautertal, near Frankenstein Castle, is thought to represent a crucial Nibelungenlied scenario. Hagen of Tronje killed Siegfried, the dragon slayer, near the Felsenmeer's Siegfriedsquelle, Siegfried's wellspring, while hunting from worms to the Odenwald. Knight George battling a man-eating lindworm near Frankenstein Castle, or a water ghost that turned into a fox near Niedenhausen, are some of the legends associated with the area. Even the region's name, Odenwald, hints to a mythological past. The Woods of Odin. The abbot delegated the management of the castle to a bailiff. Over the course of time, the bailiffs became interrobber knights, making a fortune off of boats that traveled down the Rhine. An army was assembled by the Archbishop of Mainz, who then seized control of the fortress and tore it down to the ground. Philip von Hohenfels, the resident bailiff, made a commitment to alter his behavior in exchange for the opportunity to live with him. Instead, he set about restoring the castle and going back to his previous habits. During the Great Interregnum, this event took place. Nevertheless, when Rudolf von Habsburg was elected emperor in 1273, he immediately launched a campaign to expel the robber knights from their strongholds. The year 1282 was the year when Burg Reichenstein was the target of an assault. The castle was besieged, and Dietrich von Hohenfels, the lord of the fortress, was taken captive and severely executed. This time, the fortress was completely obliterated. Over the course of many centuries, it was owned by a number of different people, and the existing castle was renovated in the 19th century. When one considers the history of Burg Reichenstein, it is not unexpected to learn that the castle is home to a ghost. The ghost is not seen, but rather heard and felt by the person. Guests often express their dissatisfaction with the fact that they do not feel isolated and that windows and doors open and close on their own volition. The fact that the ghost is never seen is perhaps for the best, since it would be a terrifying sight to witness if it were ever seen. Dietrich von Hohenfels, the robber knight who was vanquished by Rudolf von Habsburg, is believed to represent the spirit of the character that has been seen. When Hohenfels was defeated and captured, he pleaded for his 9 sons to be spared, even though he was aware that his own destiny was already predetermined. However, Habsburg was aware that the boys had been trained to plunder, pillage, and kill by their father. He wanted to set an example that would discourage future robber knights, so he declined Hohenfels' request. In its place, the sons were arranged in a row alignment. "Take a look, you murderer. Here are all of your sons," exclaimed the Habsburg crown prince. "You will find your head rolling in the sand in a minute, but if you are able to walk by your boys without their heads, I will ensure that each and every one of them remains alive, that you are able to pass." Before looking at the road that he needed to go in order to rescue his sons, Hohenfels looked each son in the eye. A few moments later, the head of the robber knight was successfully removed from his body with a single blow. However, rather than dropping to the ground, his body wavered slightly, and he was able to stroll past each of his kids, one by one, until finally collapsing to the ground. As he had promised, the 9 sons of Habsburg were granted a pardon. Burg Reichenstein was in the midst of one of its phases of ruin when Victor Hugo paid a visit to it. As he traveled through it, he came into a find. My attention was drawn to a corner of a tombstone that had emerged from the debris as I was walking along. In a hurry, I stooped down. Using my hands and feet, I was able to remove the muck, and after a short period of time, I was able to reveal a really beautiful tomb plate that was dated to the 14th century. It has a red sandstone composition to it. There was a knight in armor who was missing his head perched on this plate. D7. Albert the Bear constructed a border fortification at this location. By the middle of the 15th century, the location had become the seat of administration for the Margrave of Brandenburg. By the year 1560, Joachim II, Hector, the Elector of Brandenburg, had commissioned Christoph Römer to construct a fortification in the Italian style. This fortress would include the previous castle, palace, and Julius Tower. In the year 1562, Römer was succeeded by Francesco Chiaramella de Gandino for the position. In the year 1578, Rochus Graf zu Linar assumed control. However, the building of the Spandau Citadel was not finished until 1594, despite the fact that the first men were deployed to it in the year 1580. A besieging of the fortress was first carried out by Swedish forces in the year 1675. During the fall of Berlin in 1806, the garrison of the fortress surrendered without firing a single shot to the French army led by Napoleon. In the year 1813, it was retaken by Prussian and Russian soldiers. Nevertheless, the walls sustained significant damage during the conflict and needed major reconstruction. The castle was also used as a jail for inmates held by the Prussian state, one of which being Friedrich Ludwig Jahn, a German nationalist individual. 1935 marked the beginning of operations for the Gas Protection Laboratory of the Army. A total of around 300 scientists and technicians were engaged at the facility to work on chemical weapons. Their responsibilities included synthesis, testing on animals and humans, the creation of ordnance, and the development of production procedures. The development of nerve gas was mostly accomplished at this location. During the conflict that took place in Berlin, which took place not long before the conclusion of the Second World War, the Citadel was included into the defenses of the city. In spite of the fact that it was several hundred years old, the Citadel was difficult to assault due to its design, which was based on the Italian style. As a result, the Soviets decided to invest the Citadel and begin negotiations for a capitulation rather than shelling and attacking it. Following the conclusion of talks, the commander of the Citadel surrendered to Lieutenant General Pekhorovich's 47th Army on May 1, 1945, shortly after 15 o'clock. This action resulted in the preservation of the Renaissance Bastion fort and saved a great number of lives. Following the conclusion of the Second World War, Soviet forces were the first to take control of the Spandau Citadel. Following the partition of Berlin by the Allied forces, the city of Spandau and its citadel became a part of the British sector. Not even National Socialist war criminals were held at the Citadel, despite the fact that it had a long history of serving as a jail. The Spandau jail, which is located in the same Berlin neighborhood, was where they were held instead. The Citadel is currently home to a museum known as the Citadel. The museum features a collection of sculptures that have been taken from public display in Berlin throughout the course of the last few centuries. These sculptures include statues of Friedrich Wilhelm III and Queen Louise, as well as Nazi art and the head of a statue of Lenin that is 19 meters tall. Rumors that the spirit of an alchemist who practiced dark magic is still present on the lovely island that is known as Fraueninsel in Berlin. One of the smaller islands in Berlin's River Havel is known as the Fraueninsel, also known as Peacock Island. UNESCO has designated the island as a World Heritage Site because of the remarkable Prussian architecture that can be seen on the island. The castle on Fraueninsel is reminiscent of something from a fairy tale, and the island itself is a paradise for anyone who are passionate about environment and animals. Following the establishment of a rabbit breeding facility by Elector Frederick William Martins of Brandenburg, who was a member of the Hohenzollern family, the island was given the name Kaninchenwerder, which literally translates to Rabbit Island, in the late 1600s. In addition, the island was the location where the alchemist Johann Kunkel constructed a glass foundry through which he manufactured imitation rubies that were referred to as gold ruby glass. There was such a high level of satisfaction with him that the elector who had made the red-tinted glass gave him the island as a present. Except for Kunkel, entering and leaving the island was considered a punishable offense, and the whole location remained cloaked in secret. Kunkel was the only person responsible for this. As a result of the black smoke and the smell of chemicals emanating from the islands, the farmers who lived in the surrounding area were suspicious, and they began to suspect that witchcraft was taking place across the ocean. After his sponsor, the Great Elector, passed away, he was unable to continue receiving financial support. As a result, the foundry caught fire, and he promptly left to find employment with the Swedish monarch. There was a high probability that intentionally started the fire. The dark legends about the island begin here, since it is supposed that Johann Kunkel experimented with black magic and chemistry in his laboratory before he set it ablaze, which turned the island into an unfriendly place to stay after dark. All of these rumors are said to have originated from this location. It is reported that his soul is still roaming about restlessly as a dark ghost with red flashing eyes. This is another version of the stories. Following this, the island was left uninhabited until the Prussian king Frederick William II acquired it and constructed the Fraueninsel castle for his mistress. They began introducing exotic animals to the island after that point, including alligators, buffaloes, kangaroos, monkeys, lions, and peacocks, among other peculiar creatures. During its height, there were more than 900 animals of more than 100 different kinds present. A move to the Berlin Zoo took place in 1842, after which they remained on the island until that season. After witchcraft poisoned the very ground, The remnants are now a collection of strange birds, magnificent buildings, and traditions about the dark spirit of a sorcery that led to the destruction of the world itself. Wolfsburg Castle is located in Wolfsburg, Westphalia, Germany. This fortress, known as the Nazi Temple of Doom, inspired the classic computer game fortress Wolfenstein. Heinrich Himmler, the SS's chief, believed the castle has mysterious powers and intended to transform it into a spiritual mecca for the Nazi occult, a location for the 12 SS department chiefs and other SS elite to gather and spiritually prepare for their future missions. However, this aim was never completely realized, and only 2 such gatherings were held. The last occurred between June 12 and 15, 1941, 1 week before the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, the code name for the invasion of the Soviet Union. At the conference, Himmler informed his generals that the goal of the operation was to destroy around 30 million Slavs. The Nazi government would get dangerously near to this figure. Wolfsburg Castle's foundations date back to the Middle Ages. The castle's current design comes from the 17th century. The castle is situated near the Teutoburg forest. The fortress was supposed to be the spot where Arminus, a Germanic tribal leader, beat the Roman army, adding to its old mystique. For the last 75 years, the castle has emitted a sinister magnetism that has captivated Satanists and neo-Nazis alike, pulled in by pagan iconography and Nazi occultism, transforming this location into a cruel pilgrimage. Much of the pseudo-religious mystique that has enveloped this castle since 1945, including torch-lit ceremonies, old Nordic and pagan rites, and the mythology of the old Aryan, is fabricated. Much of the rumors arise from Himmler's distorted grasp and interpretation of Germanic and Nordic mythology. He was attracted with prophecy, mystical power, and the idea that the Aryans were a super race. The SS was created to be the personification of this concept. Himmler really sought a place where he could instill these ideas in future SS commanders. Himmler acquired the property in 1934 and leased it for 100 years at a symbolic rental payment of 1 Reichsmark each year. Initially, Hitler intended to convert the facility into a leadership school for SS officers, but this was eventually revised, and it was meant as a gathering place for the SS elite. The Wolfsburg Castle was established to investigate pseudo-scientific notions of Germanic pre- and early history, medieval history, folklore, and genealogy. All of this was designed to lay the foundation for the SS's racial indoctrination. Vast archaeological excavation sites arose here and at other notable sites, including the Reichenstein, a place of Christian devotion that the Nazis mistook for a heathen place of worship. All of the hypotheses proposed by Nazi archaeologists failed to withstand investigation, and only through intimidation and repression of academics were any of them published. The dearth of proof, however, did not deter Himmler. If he could not find the archaeology, he would fabricate it. In an Indiana Jones-style collecting frenzy, a great deal of effort was placed into gathering ancient artifacts such as the Spear of Destiny. Even the castle's architecture is fabricated. Mystic meeting rooms inspired by King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table had 17th century plaster removed from the walls and rebuilt with stone cladding to give the interior a more medieval vibe. The arches at the Hall of Generals may seem medieval, although their supports are built of concrete. It's a stunning illustration of how Himmler attempted to fabricate and reconstruct history in order to legitimize his own pseudo-religious beliefs. When you look beyond the curtain, there is nothing there, as there was with much of Nazi pomp and luxury. The specific nature of any ceremonies done here remains unclear. Historians are convinced, however, that no pagan rites to invoke Nordic gods or anything of the kind occurred. In the years following their rise to power, the Nazi Party clashed with the Christian Church, using newly discovered fake archaeology to support their push for Germans to abandon traditional Christian celebrations in favor of pagan-inspired Nazi occultism, even creating their own Christmas and marriage celebrations. During Himmler's 12-year control of the castle, this designated pseudo-religious setting hosted many weddings and swearing-in ceremonies for SS generals. Also kept here were the SS honor rings of dead colleagues. They were preserved in a box in the castle's crypt to represent the dead SS members' continuous participation. In all, 11,500 rings were stored here, but no one knows what happened to them after the war. Rumor has claimed that they are buried in a neighboring mountain. Himmler's vision for the castle was never completely realized. His desire to transform the location into a spiritual center for the new world of Nazi ideology after the final victory resulted in a castle design with monolithic proportions. His ambitions were so big that the population of Burg were to be moved to the freshly captured Lebensraum in the east, and the town would be submerged. Construction on the site started with labor from the Freiwilliger Arbeitsdienst, but with the onset of World War II, these workers were drafted into the military, and a more sinister construction approach was utilized. Himmler ordered a detention camp erected specifically for the castle's construction. More than 3,900 convicts worked on the project. The labor conditions were so bad that the Wolfsberg camp had a shockingly high death rate, with at least 1,229 individuals dying from fatigue, poor treatment, or execution. Following the loss at Stalingrad, development on the Wolfsberg castle ceased. A new edict mandated that all non-essential building projects that did not contribute to the war effort be halted, leaving the site to 42 convicts and SS guards. Shortly before the war's conclusion, Himmler had the castle razed. SS Major Heinz Macher and 15 men demolished most of the site with explosives and anti-tank mines. What was left standing was set on fire, and the site was heavily plundered in the days that followed. The medieval facade survived, and 2 chambers in the North Tower have been retained as structural remnants of Nazi construction. The crypt and the Hall of the Supreme SS Leaders, which have the sunwheel design on the floor, are unique. On March 31, 1945, the U.S. 3rd Armored Division seized the location and incarceration camp. The castle's reconstruction started in 1948, and it reopened in 1950 as a museum and youth hostel. Today, the whole site is a war memorial, with the museum housed in the old SS guard station on the castle courtyard. If you want to stay here, the youth hostel is still open. In the German state of Hesse, there is a town known as Babenhausen that dates back to the Middle Ages. It is located in the Odenwald mountain range, and a significant number of the ancient buildings and portions of the old city wall are still standing. Many human disasters, including global wars and tragedies like as witch hunts, have occurred in the ancient city. It has seen all of these calamities. In the past, the Babenhausen Kaserne, also known as DP Lager Babenhausen, was a place of residence for both German and American troops. Even though it is now a museum, the Babenhausen Kaserne was once known as DP Lager Babenhausen. Beginning in the early 1900s and continuing through both of the World Wars, it was first put to use as a place to host troop housing. As was the case with many of the former German military posts that were taken over by the United States following World War II, it was the American troops who were able to encounter the hauntings that were said to take place at Babenhausen Kaserne. Babenhausen Kaserne is supposed to be haunted by ghosts from the Second World War, and according to accounts, these spirits have been seen wearing their uniforms. It is stated that they continue to haunt the barracks. During this historical period, wars were raging all throughout Europe, and these barracks were home to men who had served in both World War I and World War II. On account of the many occurrences that take place in the barracks after dark, there are several ghost tales that circulate about it. You may hear footsteps and people yelling instructions in the middle of the night, coming from the basement of the ancient barracks. The lights at the barracks switch on and off when no one is supposed to be inside of it. If you listen, you can hear the sound of footsteps. There is also a peculiar legend that the troops received unusual phone calls throughout their stay via landlines. This myth stems from the period when landlines were in use. Furthermore, the fact that the voice on the other side of the telephone is not the specters of male warriors from the past is an extremely peculiar occurrence. As far as they are concerned, the only thing that they heard was the voice of a lady, and it seemed like she was speaking in reverse. Who is this woman who is speaking in a location that is mostly inhabited by men? Is it even conceivable that she is saying something? Upon further investigation, it was discovered that the land upon which the barracks is constructed has a far more ancient history, one that dates back to the witch hunts that took place in Germany many years ago. The witch tower, which serves as the town's most recognizable feature, can be found in the historic district of Babenhausen. A witch tower, also known as a Hexenturm in German, is a name that is used to refer to a tower that was a component of a town fort or castle in the past and was used as a jail. The term originates from the historical period of the witch hunts, during which individuals who were accused of being witches were held captive and subjected to various forms of torture that culminated in their execution by burning at the stake. There is a possibility that the witch tower in Babenhausen is connected to the other bizarre paranormal legend that circulates in the ancient barracks. It is said that during the 17th century, there were more than 50 women who were held captive in this witch tower on the suspicion that they were witches. All of these ladies were executed by being burnt alive in the marketplace in the city. According to the legends, one of these witches who was burnt at the stake was a specific Mrs. Müller. She was believed to be responsible for the deaths of 3 men whom she was said to have slain using magic. Moving ahead in time to the year 1843, there was another lady who was connected to Mrs. Müller who was executed by stoning because they believed she was a witch. According to the allegations, this specific Mrs. Müller was responsible for the deaths of at least 5 German troops during the construction of the barracks. Their corpses were discovered in the attic of the Babenhausen Kaserne, and the circumstances surrounding their deaths remained a mystery, according to this tradition. Or is it possible that the second version of the tale, in which there is also a Mrs. Müller who is reported to be haunting the headquarters building at Babenhausen Kaserne, is the one that is occurring? At the Babenhausen Kaserne, she was a young lady who was about to get engaged to one of the troops. When this occurred, many believed that World War I would be ended in a matter of months. This happened during the early stages of the conflict. The fiancé of Mrs. Müller, along with 3 of his companions, hid in the attic with Mrs. Müller's assistance because they did not want to be sent to fight in France. Over the course of a couple of days, they remained there. However, Mrs. Müller discovered them when she attempted to smuggle some food and water up to them. The fact that all 4 deserters were taken into custody and executed by a firing squad was too much for Mrs. Müller to have to bear. Mrs. Müller leaped from the headquarters building on the very same day that they were shot, and the fall, which was fatal, took her life immediately. In addition, the tradition states that the clocks that were attached to the officer's clock tower stopped working at precisely the same time that she passed away. Some people believe that she is one of the ghosts who are said to be haunting the barracks. In summing up, the Babenhausen Kaserne, which is located in Hesse, Germany, is home to a fascinating combination of historical figures and supernatural stories. The haunting sounds of a lady who speaks backwards and the ghosts of Nazi troops are just two examples of the weird stories that are said to be associated with this ancient barracks. Whether it be the sightings of soldiers dressed in their uniforms, lights flickering on and off, or the sounds of faraway footfall and authoritative voices, the presence of the past continues to manifest itself behind the walls of Babenhausen Kaserne. These spectral apparitions serve as a reminder of the chaotic circumstances that occurred during World War II, as well as the sacrifices that were made during that time. There is also an additional element of mystery that is added by the link that exists between the Witch Tower in the town and the unusual occurrences that have been recorded in the barracks. The captivity and sad end of more than 50 women who were convicted of witchcraft in the Witch Tower has fueled suspicion about their possible participation in the supernatural phenomena that have been seen. Is it possible that their restless souls are looking for retribution or justice? As the years go by, these spectral stories continue to fascinate the imaginations of both tourists and residents alike. This ensures that the memory of the barracks and the ghosts that call it home will be remembered for many centuries to come. Regardless of whether or not one has faith in the supernatural, the tales that are told about the Babenhausen Kaserne serve as a terrifying reminder of the turbulent past that took place inside its walls. The castle, known as WOLFSEGG, was built in the 13th century. It has been in town for such a long time that it has become an important component of the scenery of the village and has had a significant impact on the community that is located around it. It was constructed by a wealthy individual by the name of Ulrich von Laber, with the intention of serving as a strategic stronghold for the region. Despite the fact that the castle was never required to serve as a defensive construction, it was essential to ensure that the population enjoyed a sense of calm and security. For the most part, WOLFSEGG Castle served as a place of accommodation for marching soldiers. Later on, it was deserted and handed over to the community, who used it as a refuge for families that were in need of assistance, despite the fact that it was in dire need of revitalization. In the end, a rich and eccentric guy was responsible for the majority of the castle's restoration. These restoration activities are still going on today, and the most of them are being carried out by a group of volunteers. Among the many ghost stories associated with WOLFSEGG Castle, the most well-known one is about Clara von Helfenstein, who was married to the guy who had everything. There is a legend that describes the difficulties that occurred inside the couple's marriage as a result of Ulrich's military commitments, which required him to travel often. When he was not there, Clara would find herself in the castle, feeling bored and lonely, and she would turn to other people to satisfy her need. After some time, Clara began having an affair, which Ulrich eventually found out about the next day. The legend goes that Ulrich, upon finding that she had been having an affair, had her murdered by local men in her bedroom on a single night. Since the time when Clara was murdered, there have been rumors going about that a white lady has been seen wandering around the castle, particularly in her chamber. A great number of people are of the opinion that this is the spirit of Clara, and she is also believed to be responsible for poltergeist activity, which includes generating disruptions in electromagnetic fields, producing weird light abnormalities, and producing full-bodied apparition sightings. Despite the fact that this folklore makes for a ghost story that is very captivating. According to historical accounts, Clara really outlived her husband and was not a victim of homicide at the hands of her spouse. Whatever the truth may be regarding her passing, many people continue to think that her presence is still present at the castle, and that she is the one who is responsible for the name of the Lady in White statue at WOLFSEGG Castle. Another eerie story that is often claimed about the area around WOLFSEGG Castle is simply referred to as the Hole. It has been stated that this hole may be found inside a portion of the woodland that surrounds the castle, not too far away from the castle. It is said to be a deep chasm that was once excavated and discovered to contain enormous numbers of bones throughout several of its chambers. This information was discovered during the exploration. According to the legend, a large number of individuals, including Ulrich and his sons, vanished inside the forest under strange circumstances. No one will ever see them again. Some people have hypothesized that the hole is home to a monster that might be connected to the disappearances that have been occurring. In support of this notion are assertions that unusual sounds, which seem like they are coming from a beast, are heard coming from the forest and the region around the hole. Online and in the immediate vicinity, there is a limited amount of information that can be found on the location of this hole. In addition, I was unable to find it despite my extensive searches around the jungle. The possibility exists that this local legend was fabricated with the intention of discouraging people from venturing into the forest. Barracks that were utilized by the Nazis as a mental health facility during World War II are among the most incredible examples of this sort of structure. A little distance outside the city borders of Schweinfurt in Germany is where you'll find the Conn Barracks. During the war, the Conn Barracks was a Luftwaffe airfield that was erected in 1936 specifically for Stuka pilots. Prior to the war, it was known as Flugplatz Schweinfurt. During the war, it was primarily used as a bomber base, and according to folklore, it was also used as a kind of hospital or a mental ward of some kind that was in operation. It makes perfect sense that there was some kind of hospital-like area during this kind of site throughout the war as well, even if it is very unlikely that this was the primary function of the barracks, in particular taking into consideration that this specific barrack was subjected to 17 bombing strikes by the Allied forces. Following the conclusion of the war, the United States of America gained control of the area and renamed it Schweinfurt Air Base, which is where Conn Barracks is located. It was in the hands of the American military, much like many other old Nazi camps, barracks, and other military locations, and it was utilized by them until 2014, when the majority of American personnel moved out of Germany. At its height, Schweinfurt Air Base provided housing for around 11,000 people, including military personnel and their families. During the time when the Americans were using Conn Barracks as living quarters, they utilized the area that was located above a drainage chamber that had previously been used by the Nazis to keep dead remains before embalming them. There are a lot of paranormal stories concerning Conn Barracks that originate from these specific rooms. It is a little difficult to confirm or refute whether or not these reports are accurate, but what is certain is that they originate from these rooms. There were at least 2 American troops there in the same room on 2 distinct occasions. They saw a Nazi soldier and a nurse who were both covered in blood, standing next to their beds as they awoke in the middle of the night. The nurse was also covered in blood. Because the ghosts are still there, the troops are unable to move at all. They are held completely immobile. Almost as if he were issuing commands, the Nazi soldier continued speaking to the nurse in German. He seemed to be giving her instructions. A sorrowful expression appears on the nurse's face as she reaches over the bed and chokes the soldier down till they return to sleep.
House, often known as the Children's Hospital, is a well-liked destination for photographers and explorers due to its convenient position relative to people living in the metropolitan areas of Berlin. However, it also attracts vandals, homeless individuals looking for sanctuary, and street artists who are looking for a place to work. Those individuals who are courageous enough to enter this abandoned complex have a greater reason to be afraid of the building's foundations than they have of the people who are within. From the moment one enters the Children's Hospital's perimeter gate, the whole grounds are free to exploration, and the buildings themselves are also available to exploration. The condition of some is far worse than that of others, and the flooring of the top levels and stairs that are disintegrating should be navigated with extreme care. It wasn't until 1911 that the Reichenstein Children's Hospital opened its doors for the first time, although the planning for the pediatric hospital had already began many years earlier. The development of the medical facility was considered essential in light of the recent rise in the death rates of children under the age of 5. This children's hospital was a large building that had technology that was considered to be top of the art at the specific time. It was comprised of a park that was located in the vicinity, a number of huge buildings that were used to house patients, and even its very own dairy farm. Despite the fact that the building was financially successful and even underwent expansion in the late 1980s, it would eventually be shut down in the year 1997. From this point forward, the hospital complex was abandoned to be reclaimed by nature via the process of gradual deterioration. However, despite the fact that the abandoned hospital was included on a registry of historic monuments, it was eventually sold to a Russian investor who retained ownership of the facility but did not make any attempt to restore it. Beginning with the new proprietors of the building, a dispute started to surround them. This included claims that it could cure cancer and AIDS, in addition to being tied to a wide variety of other questionable economic endeavors. In a short amount of time, the hospital was taken away from the control of this immoral corporate investor, and its future remains uncertain. This landmark is not marketed as an official attraction within the city of Berlin, despite the fact that it is an unofficial attraction within the district. Mostly, this is because to the many safety issues and the fact that it is privately owned. Visitors to the Kinderkrankenhaus Weissensee have the opportunity to take in a piece of Berlin's history that is in the process of deteriorating, in addition to a variety of elaborate and well-made works of street art. It is a piece of history that is genuinely one of a kind and gorgeous in a manner that is a little bit sinister. Going to the location in a group and during the daytime hours. In addition, when you are investigating the inside of the building, you should be aware of the decaying structure. In spite of the fact that the land is enclosed by a sturdy metal fence, there are apertures inside the fence that enable access to the property. In all likelihood, the formation of the Black Forest occurred during the Triassic and Jurassic eras. It has a total area of around 6,009 square kilometers, 2,320 square miles, and the Feldberg, which is standing at a height of 1,493 meters, 4,898 feet, is its highest point. The name of the forest, which was derived from the Celtic god Abnoba, was given to the woodland in ancient times. The name Silva Marciana, which literally translates to Black Forest, was used during Roman times. The forest was formerly used for the production of wood and for heavy mining, but it is today considered to be one of the most popular recreational areas in Germany. It is responsible for the creation of more than 300,000 employment in the tourism sector. Hiking, mountain biking, skiing, and water recreation are only few of the activities that may be enjoyed most in this environment. There are a number of medieval military fortifications, monasteries, and castles that have been preserved in these region ruins. When the Black Forest was first established, it was a mixed forest, but by the middle of the 19th century, it had been nearly entirely cleared of its forest cover. The reason for this was the practice of intensive forestry. Large areas were replanted, with monocultures of spruce being the predominant species. It was in the year 1990 that a series of storms caused devastation to the woodland. While Hurricane Lothar was raging through the Black Forest on December 26, 1999, it was a monster. It is still possible to see the aftermath of the storm in the forest, in the same vein as the Lothar Path, which is a forest expedition and educational route. The Nature Center in Reichenstein is where you will be able to locate this. A number of the regions that were affected by the storms were left to nature. The recovery of the mixed forest may be seen in some areas. The Black Forest is home to a distinct collection of animal species that are not found anywhere else in the world. There are many examples of endangered species, such as the Black Forest cattle, the Lumbricus bedensis, which is a large earthworm, the Black Forest horse, which is a powerful draft horse, and the Western capercaillie, which is a bird. Although the Black Forest is not really haunted, there are stories and legends that are told about it that may be rather unsettling. A headless horseman is said to have been seen traversing the deep woodland on his magnificent white stallion, according to certain legends. There are tales that tell of a forest king who kidnaps ladies and takes them to his underwater cave, where he lives among the nymphs. In addition, the friendly dwarves and the werewolves that had been hiding arrive after nightfall. Since you are aware, historical fairy tales are inappropriate for those who are easily frightened. It was not their intention to amuse the youngsters. Rather, they were there to impart tough teachings. There is little doubt that the brothers Grimm were influenced by the gloom of the forest. It was this woodland that served as the inspiration for the story of Hansel and Gretel, as well as the Gansemagd, also known as the Goose Girl. A child-eating witch who was burned in her own oven, and a traitorous maid who was revealed and subsequently rolled around the city in a spiked barrel are two examples of the terrible elements that can be found in both of these fairy tales. Have a restful night, my dear children. One of the most terrifying creatures that may be found in the Black Forest is known as Der Grossmann, also known as the Tall Man. There is a striking resemblance between this malformed guy with protruding eyes and Slender Guy, who has numerous arms. Slender Man does not have any face characteristics, despite this fact. The Der Grossmann was developed from woodcuts that were produced in the 16th century by an artist who should remain nameless. The youngsters who were deemed to be delinquent would be sent to the woods, where Der Grossmann would follow them about until they confessed their wrongdoings to a parent. When it comes to spending a vacation or a day in the great outdoors, the Black Forest is the ideal destination. It is an excellent location for anyone who are interested in history, wildlife, and leisure. Nevertheless, as darkness strikes, you should avoid going into the woods.